YouTube is a vacuum because it serves an audience thing. It's an audience need. It serves an audience consumption point. People are time poor. They want to know what they're getting. They're selfish. They want to know that the thing that they're going to get is going to satisfy that need in that moment. And they don't have the time to be disappointed. The best creators, they don't separate the creative process from the distribution process, right? They are ideating thumbnails. And if they can't think of a thumbnail for a story they want to tell, they'll park it until they can or kill it. The virality narrative hurts this space a lot. And it doesn't mean there aren't these edge case moments, but that's not the majority. And the majority is a 2-3 year build.
This is an essential roadmap for anyone creating in the kids space. Welcome to We Interrupt This Broadcast. I'm your host, Aven Yap. I'm joined by the founder of Team Falco, Nico Lockhart. Nico is a YouTube strategist with a decade of experience across traditional and digital platforms. Closer to home, Nico facilitated the inaugural Kids IP Incubator by Screen Australia and the Australian Children's Television Foundation, where we first met. We'll be talking about building kids content on YouTube, really getting under the skin of what a contemporary audience means, and the financial and practical realities of going digital first. Broadcasting to us from London, Nico, welcome to the program.
Thank you so much for having me.
Nico, why kids content? How did you first find your way into kids IP, and what drew you to digital first content specifically?
So I'll answer that latter part first. I think the richness and wealth of information that you can get from that space was the thing that drew me to it. So I started my career at a advertising firm that was doing market research in the shareability of online video, and specifically around branded stories. And they had a kind of a way of looking at it through psychological responses and social motivations, and then kind of applying some of those learnings before the creative was live. And that particularly just gave me an interest around audiences. But then I was looking at that further through YouTube Studio on like content I was creating, but also kind of just understanding the depth that you could get. So just from a very early point in my career, I was just looking at information and data and hypothesizing around how to engage audiences more. And that seemed to only be growing in kind of the digital space. And I kind of landed somewhat by chance and got really into it based on that, the people I got to work with. There was so much like kindness, thoughtfulness, consideration around audiences, consideration about, what are we giving them to consume, and why is that so important? That to me was the kind of the two things that really drew me to kids and digital. I was also just seeing the doors that opened, or the ones that I could get open. I think that's the other thing, is like it's always tough when you're starting your career. You just try to open as many doors that you can, and the ones that kind of receive you are the ones that you tend to follow. I was watching YouTube since I was 16. I was the person at university who watched YouTube over television. We're talking 2009. But I was watching since 2006. There was a huge shift and an uptick in YouTube around 2012. So I was already massively engaged in that space, going to creator-based events like UK ones like Summer in the City or VidCon. It was always like, when is everyone else going to catch up? Seeing audiences grow at such scale, I knew that was going to be the TV and entertainment of the future. It was just an eventuality of when.
I'm curious, in 2006 to 2009, which creators were you following? For me, it was Justin Bieber. I was the biggest believer, if you would believe. I just wanted to be him, But how about you?
Great question. So there was a lot in the kind of UK community that I followed, and some great kind of like sketch comedy people, and some of the people who also then went on to create the first kind of creator group called Maker Studios, which Disney then acquired later down the line. And the other side was, on the kind of the channel flip, was another kind of creator group, and MCN in the UK. And those are sort of like early YouTube businesses that I was like, oh, this could be a job Like there could be people behind this as an infrastructure, understanding how can we continue to grow this and make it a career and a line of business as well as artistic expression and creative expression.
I guess you were observing this industry growing. When did you feel like you really started to participate in it?
I think there's 2 points. So one is very much when I started to be invited to some of the after parties at some of those kinds of conferences, right? Where it would be a creator who I got talking to invited to me and I'd be like, wow, this is so exciting. But that was only the beginning. I was really just a kind of attendee. And then I think that there was another point where with the kind of the first couple of roles I had in this space, I was allowed to kind of go shoot at the actual YouTube space. And again, so that to me was another turning point where I was like, wow, I'm actually at YouTube filming for YouTube. This is amazing. This is it. And those were so early on. Fast forward 4 or 5 more years being on stage at various events like MIP or Kids Screen and talking about this space to people who are kind of like turning their heads to it. And then I would say, working with Screen Australia, that was a real line in the sand moment where government screen bodies realize that they need to support the future of this industry in spite of it being complex, challenged, and it is going to be where audiences are. So figuring out how to support practitioners is vital. And I think that they really led the charge on that.
So, Nico, tell me about YouTube. Can you clap it out for me? How would you define discovery in today's landscape? What does that mean to you?
This is a challenge no matter the space or the subsection of our industry at the moment. Marketing really is the blend of marketing and programming. That's always what it has been, and it is just the same on YouTube. The challenge that I think is that there are abundance of tiles of potential things to watch, and the story starts with that tile. And I think that can be a thumbnail on YouTube, that can be a thumbnail on Netflix, that can be the tile of the app on your smart TV. There are so many roads that are endlessly splitting and so many points of friction for audiences to not watch. And there are more points of not watching as there are points of watching. And I think that that's one thing that I find people miss is they talk a lot about the amount that we can watch, but there's also the amount that we don't watch. And I think that that's the immediacy, the immediate expectation on when I speak to people is they're already assuming people are watching. Whereas I'm thinking about the 6, 7, 8, 10 friction points from an audience desire and an audience need and an audience state to actually watching the first frame of my content. And there are so many of those. And I think that YouTube allows you to both navigate that because it's an algorithmic serving platform. So you can bubble up to the front page of somebody's like YouTube panel when they open it up. But then there are also friction points to get there. And so I think it's about understanding what are those friction points and how can you design content to cut through those friction points. And some of that might be through understanding audiences now, right? What is it that they're engaging with? Why should they watch your show? What story? How does it fit with what's happening in the world right now? Beyond what will it satisfy? What audience need state will they come to platforms and what are they desiring? And starting to understand and design content based off that, to me, allows you to flip discovery on its head and then just get pushed via the algorithmic serving.
And can you tell me more about what those friction points mean to you? What might they look like?
I think some of it is just like the most simple things of like UI, UX on these apps. So again, if you open YouTube, you are already being served content, right? If you go there to find a particular thing, before you even have started to look for that thing, you're already being shown other things. So you may get distracted. I may go with the intent of learning about some recipes, but then I go, there's a new video of a show I like, right? So if you make a show which fulfills an audience need state today, they are also already being distracted by other things that they are already interested in watching. So I think it's like knowing that that is the environment. And I think I always say it's like, look, if you think of linear TV as like a parent putting on a DVD for a kid, SVOD is like a wall of DVDs. And then like YouTube is like walking down the street and everyone's trying to get you to watch their DVD, right? And if you think of that as like the adjustments of how programming has changed there, and then I also like to say, like, look, imagine linear TV is like a taster menu, and then you have YouTube on the other end as like a all-you-can-eat buffet. These are the environments that you're producing and creating in, and you have to engage with that consumption and distribution environment.
You have to participate as a user yourself.
Yeah, you have to understand like and get in that frame of mind and that understanding of like, what is it that I'm getting satisfied by or frustrated by with this platform, with this user experience? What is it that just works for me? What are the formats that work in this space that align with why I would go to this platform? And I think that then allows you to understand particular formats or designing and creating shows for the right platform. And I think that, again, just because YouTube is taking such a large slice of streaming, it doesn't mean that all shows still fit there, right? It doesn't mean there are a lot. And I do think there's always probably a way of looking at it or developing it for that platform. But again, we're looking at evolutionary cycles of content formats and things like that as well. And there are particular flavors of the moment. So again, maybe your show could be great for YouTube 5 years ago or in 5 years as well. And I think it's also just being really conscious of what is it that makes this timely for what you're creating and for audiences' demand.
And do you then think that having a creator-led voice is important with these restrictions on formats and trends?
I think that kind of repetition of a familiarity of person, characters, all of this definitely works and helps. And there is just an assumption almost that there is a single or kind of couple of creators behind this, even if it's a big infrastructure and very much run like a television production or series. I think that there is that expectation with some audiences that it's still just a small creator group producing these shows. So I think it can help, but it's also really dependent on the show and the format. Like someone like Darman is obviously a huge studio producing for this, but he's not really in the shows. I want to go on YouTube, but I don't want to be on camera. Do I have to be? No, I don't think you do. I think you can create formats where you don't need to be front and center and on camera.
But still have your voice cut through.
Absolutely. And I think it's about, but that's again why it's like, what is it about your creator voice that is relevant and important for audiences today?
Nico, you've said before that you just need to be 1% better than what is currently out there. Can you tell us more about what that means?
I think you can always be more than 1% better. But the micro gains theory is something that a kind of a British cycling coach led his team as a consideration on, and it led his team to getting a gold medal over a period of time of training. So go have a little look at that kind of like 1% gains theory, because basically the 1% increase every day has huge increases over time rather than versus 1% decay. Like that is actually quite small 1% decay, but 1% increase is like quite a lot more gains. So I think it's just about over time, YouTube rewards steady, slow increasing of measurements, and it's very good at doing that. You're not having to get everything right first time, but there being something, and you incrementally getting better. And I think that there is so much out there that there is going to be someone doing something similar to you. And if you can do it only 1% better, then there is a reason for audiences to stay with you over another version. YouTube really is an all ships rise platform. We already have a family-based preschool narrative show. We don't want another one of those. YouTube's really good at kind of finding similar channels and similar audience buckets. So we call it, looking across your audience neighborhood and thinking about it as these kind of groups of channels that kind of serve and feed each other. And actually, you want to identify those as quickly as you can, because YouTube likes to find more things that are similar to keep people on the platform. So if it can kind of bounce you between two different creators, it will reward you for that. So again, it's that thing of, if you can be 1% better, if you can be 10% better, why not? A lot of people talk about iterate and learn on YouTube, and it is absolutely true. I think having a format that naturally allows iterative and flexible work is better than just trying lots of different formats. I think trying lots of different formats can often be what people take from that. I've found it be more impactful if you kind of pick a format that naturally allows flexibility, and then you kind of just build and grow from there.
Can you give an example of that?
Things that are popular on the platform have a lot of flexibility, right? Mr. Beast is an example of an infinitely flexible format. It's just him challenging people, right? It could be the smallest of challenges, it could be the biggest of challenges. It kind of is entirely dependent on what he thinks is the right idea for that week, month, period of time. But I would say on the other side, like, The Simpsons is very flexible. It's a family, right? If there's lots of economical, financial uncertainty, they can explore topics that impact families there. If there needs to be more light and comedy, they can go more weird and surreal. If they there's a lot of flexibility in a format like that. Sitcoms have a lot of that. It's very simple archetypal characters, and then you can kind of push them in lots of different ways that the writers want to explore, widening that potential funnel of opportunity. But again, not fundamentally changing your kind of underlying concept. I think it's an interesting challenge to create, but fun challenge to create a very flexible format. But that allows you to be much more nimble and insert. I think people would always expect me to go like, well, what's the trend this week? Let's make a show that's about that trend. And I would say, no, like create a flexible format that we can bring a trend into. Right. So that means you can never expire if the trend moves on, or if that topic of interest moves on. It can naturally move through the show and the series and the format that you're creating.
Nico, one of the concepts that you introduced in the Kids IP Incubator that totally blew my mind is that of thumbnail first ideation. Can you walk me through what that means?
When I first started producing an animated series, we already had a lot of catalog on the channel. So I was able to learn the types of things that people clicked on. And this was in 2016. But I'd already known that creators were kind of getting obsessed over their thumbnails and figuring out how to do that. And I think everyone was familiar with like a creator's thumbnail face, kind of doing a shock face, hands on the sides, big expression. But I was thinking, how do I bring this into narrative? How do I bring this into not kind of creative formats? How do I bring this into story? So I would bring what I would see over indexing of clicks to the writer's room. That would be my kind of a place where I would bring an element of discussion to. It doesn't mean that you just weave that through the stories you want to tell. The thing that I think we're at now is kind of a step further, which is that is the start of your act 3-act structure. Like I think that your act 1 starts with your thumbnail and your title. Because where you're kind of used to icebreakers to kind of warm the audience is already warm. They want content. They want story, right? So I think you need to kind of go beyond your icebreaker and get straight into story. And I think that then that act 1 is the inciting incident that kind of starts to build and kind of twist the story, but you're setting up expectations of what that might be or what that's going to be through your thumbnail. And so even through like non-narrative formats, you're still needing to set expectations for the audience, create curiosity gaps, create senses of like need and desire, and that this piece of content will fulfill that. And so I think it's essential to the development process that you can articulate why this is worth watching in a thumbnail. And it's something that creators are obsessed with and will create like the really kind of like big creators will create kind of up to, 10, 20 thumbnails for a particular video. And I don't think you need to do that necessarily, but I mean, it's that thing of like, as you grow and as you learn, you need to start thinking about how do you sell this in the right way. And it's hard and it's nuanced. So testing is required, but you don't need to dive straight in with overwhelming yourself with that, but at least just engaging with, okay, that's when my story starts. How do I communicate a promise of what someone will get if they watch, and make them feel like if they don't watch, they're going to miss out on something, right? And just creating that from a visual is not an easy thing, but it's a vital part of the ecosystem that we now consume content in at such scale.
It sounds like you're trying to create that single frame comic.
Yes, it's like a comic. It is a comic book panel in many ways, and trying to communicate all of that information. And I think just going and looking at sort of top creators and really thinking about what is it that you'll watch over not watch.
It sounds like you're flipping the entire traditional development process on its head, because normally in the more traditional spaces, you would write your script, you would shoot your movie, edit it, and the distributor would create the poster and the trailer. It sounds like in YouTube, it's the total opposite.
Yeah, and I think creativity and distribution used to be extremely separate. And I think that they are molded together more than just like weaved together. I think that they are one. I think that they have been melted down and forged together. And the best creators work in that way. They don't separate the creative process from the distribution process, right? They are ideating thumbnails. And if they can't think of a thumbnail for a story they want to tell, they'll park it until they can or kill it. And I think that that to me shows how vital that is in the process. It's not a baton that you hand down a chain, right? And try to bring people up to speed on a vision. It's, you have to be thinking about your distribution strategy and whether that works for current consumption and distribution methods.
Can you tell us about Team Falco and what sort of work you're doing?
Team Falco is myself, David Hutchinson, and Jesse Stevenson. David is a creator himself. I believe you've done an episode with him. And so he's the creator and showrunner of a series called Boy and Dragon, which has done over 7 billion views on the platform. And then Jessie is more on this kind of audience strategy side. So she's always been kind of behind a lot of big channel strategies, audience strategies, and I've worked with her for many years. So what we do now is we're an IP development studio, so we can be service for hire, doing audience analysis. We can kind of take something that you have and help you redevelop it, be a writing partner, be a creative partner, but also start to build that business plan around your IP as well and help you tweak it creatively for it to serve the potential audience that you want it to. So we do focus on animated properties. We think that that's a really exciting space to be. A lot of creators are more in the personal brand space, and we think that that's great. And there's lots of chance and opportunity to build formats around personal brands. But what we particularly like is narrative, and we like characters, and we like kind of what animation and the format of animation. So for us, that's a really interesting space. And we feel like it's really underserved, especially in the teen market right now. You're seeing indie animation pilots drop onto YouTube at quite scale, to the point where YouTube released a white paper about it to explore why indie animation is growing so much on YouTube. But the truth is, like, these are still individual creators spending 2 years to create a single pilot, right? And then they can't follow up. And so what we're looking to do is build a business that can allow people to find audiences that can allow a weekly, release of episodes, right? And that's the goal here. We're working with indie studios, larger toycos to develop for the space, or take things that have maybe plateaued for a while, right? And maybe they have had success with the brand equity they've had off platform, and they're not actually pulling the levers of the platform. Let's talk about Bluey. Does 200 to 300 million monthly views on YouTube. I could double check that right now for what it actually has been recently, but there are creator animated series that do 500 million monthly views, right? So
wow.
Thinking about Bluey is, I'm not going to deny Bluey's size, but on YouTube, there are channels that are just as big, and that doesn't always convert to audience stickiness, retail sales, all of that. So that's what I'm saying, that in some ways, like, just to kind of, again, compare the scale you have to even not be as big as some of the platform's well-known brands, but it's that thing of, because they've got brand equity, they don't need to have such a detailed, nuanced audience plan, right? And so if you're looking at some of those mid-tier IPs that are maybe have huge fan bases, are really excited, actually you have to kind of lean into some of that audience native strategies if you're wanting to compete in the scale of the potential on the platform. And some, there's creators who have grown to doing there's a creator in the sports space called Celindet. She does like 1 billion views a month as a creator brand. So she does a lot of soccer, like, UK football content. And she's grown over the last 2 years to that scale. She has over 50 million subscribers and does that scale of views. But most, lots of people haven't heard of her, but she has a proper audience first strategy. And some of that might be chance that she's built that audience first strategy. She delivers on all the things that we've talked about today, right? It's great hangout content. It feels like you're part of her extended friendship group. And it has really amazing thumbnails that make me intrigued, especially if I was more into that space. So I think the potential and opportunity is there for sure. So I think it's about helping people navigate that through. What we do is we do audience affinity research and we call it a digital playbook. We put together a digital playbook for somebody to have that audience affinity research, give you very specific, clear, creative recommendations, as well as offering things like, views forecasting, revenue forecasting, conversion modeling. We can do some of that, but again, all of this is new territory. So all of this is good guesses while providing a path and a place for people to navigate.
Coming back to trends, how do you even figure out what is a trend, what isn't, and what you think is a trend?
So I think that there can be particular topics that do well across particular verticals of creators. And then I think once it crosses verticals of creators, that to me is when it signals like, okay, there is something here that is building. Often if you can see it really growing within a particular, what a lot of creators call niche, and if you see it move to an adjacent niche, I think that that's a really good tell that this is a bigger than just a single interesting topic. And I think that to me is and what you want to do is catch it before it does that. The thing that I think that people can get really caught up in with the word trend is trends feel short-lived. And we live in such a tight trend cycle in so much of the world, and in fashion, cycles are getting tighter. In social media, they last 2 weeks. And as soon as your favorite brand jumps on them, they're dead. Like, these are the sorts of things that we're very used to hearing about. But trends and topics on YouTube can last years. And especially like trending framing devices can last even longer than a few years. So I think it's also about understanding.
What do you mean by framing devices?
The simplest one, which is a split screen, right? It's kind of going, here's a problem, here's the solution. So it's like the same person going like, no, this is such a bad thing. And then the other screen is the same person going, oh, wow, now I know this thing. This is amazing, right? That's a split screen framing device of problem solution, right? And then it's like the 5 things I wish I knew before I did X, right? And you can kind of then insert a lot of different things into that. But you can also create that in story and use that in more narrative stories. And we've done that lots as well. Exploring those framing devices of how do you, again, it's going back to the comic book. It's how do you tell a story in a single frame. To me, it's about extracting those macro ones to start with, and then also finding some of those evergreen ones, and then kind of bringing the more timely ones, which the timely ones even then will still last a year, 18 months, 2 years. And I think identifying channels in your audience neighborhood is a good way to start doing that and start seeing things that they do a couple of times. And then if they're the ones within your audience neighborhood do that topic a couple of times. The challenge is we've been doing this for 10 years. Everyone on YouTube is starting to catch up to this methodology, and you're starting to see it a lot across all sorts of different niches and genres. But there is still space to play using this method, but if you're always kind of 1% better. And I think that you have to engage with the why as not just the what, and like, why is this working? What is it that's intriguing? What about this is fun? And then add to that rather than just adding to the what. And there are topics like that have been doing really well over the last little while in across the kids space, but also beyond, something like 100 years of. But if you type that now, you're just oversaturated. So you want to catch it at the beginning of that wave, but it's been around for a couple of years. Another one is like secret rooms. So like people building secret rooms in their houses, or, building, but then that's gone on beyond, like building a secret restaurant, building a secret football pitch, or building a secret games room, like all of these things that kind of then become beyond that initial fun. These are very much, some of these are very much in that kind of like Mr. Beast-esque genre niche, but, and I think that there is a lot of competition in that space, but you see those move into narrative, you see them move into different places all the time. But again, if you can extract the why is this interesting and apply that to the stories you want to tell.
Do you have a specific methodology in how you identify what is a trend and what isn't?
The methodology for me and for us is turning over a lot of stones, and that's a slow process, but I think that to find it a topic level, I've seen a lot of I've used loads of social listening to platforms. I have tried to develop tools with great developers, and there is still something about just understanding the similar channels and taking the time to do that and seeing the things that come up time and time again for people works better and actually faster, and in a way that then is less surface, and you start to be able to understand that why better. So I think that it is sometimes just about finding channels, search it, and then like looking at their top videos. But are their top videos 7 years old? Or you start to scroll down and some will be 5 years old, 3 years old. There's one that's 3 months old. Okay, this means that if this can cut through their top videos and it's only a few months old, this is hot right now. So I think it's about looking at things like that and just starting to understand if you eyeball all of someone's recent videos, what's the average they're going to get, right? Roughly, even if it's quite a broad range, even if it's between 100,000 and 600,000. Okay, but this one's got 2 million. That's interesting. Oh, they did this topic 6 months ago. Oh, and this one did 7 million. Oh, okay, that's interesting. Okay. And so it's about just starting to piece these things together. And then you go look at like maybe 2 other creators and you see that they did that topic as well. Or they did that topic and it didn't do well. Okay, that's interesting. And so you just start to jot all of this kind of information down and track it. I always sort of connect it to like when I was in college and someone was saying like, make your sketchbook alongside your artistic project. That was always like the thing that I found really hard, but documenting your process was always something I just ignored. But if you can do that and document your process during this research phase, you start to find these commonalities and these threads. And some of them you'll learn not what not to do as much as what to do. But some of them you'll start to see that the video posted 15 years ago was popular, but so was the video posted 3 months. And you go, okay, well, this has moved into what I'd call an evergreen topic, right? This isn't a trend. This is just a topic that works so well in this niche that you could just keep doing it. And some topics like that in the preschool space, especially on YouTube, are videos where you explore the process of going to the dentist, various routines specifically for kids. Like these are things that kids are continuously fascinated by. And it's a pretty universal thing. Like we've always done episodes in the preschool space about these sorts of things. So again, like there's lots about like growing taller or first day at school. These are not mind-blowing topics, but they are things that work on YouTube and allow you to kind of reach a little bit further. But again, it's about communicating them in a way that the platform understands. So this is obviously I'm talking about very specifically the kids space, but there are lots of these sorts of things across niches, genres that you have to just sit down and do that analysis of. And that can be overwhelming, but I think just starting to search through keywords, starting to see what creators come up, create a new profile on YouTube that is almost like clean, that's away from your algorithm, like create what you think your audience's algorithm might be, and start to save and subscribe to creators in that independent, separate space that can kind of be almost this dumping ground of learning. I think these are the sorts of things that people need to do to be able to understand the space. Because again, many artists won't, things that you like aren't always the things that you create, but sometimes they are. So I think it's also just about having that separation and exploration in that. It's dense and it's nuanced, and I think that that's part of what's overwhelming for a lot of people. But I think just start. I would say also there's a lot of creators for creators. And so just find a couple of creators for creators that you really like. I quite like Colin and Samir. They're a great pair who have had a podcast called Creator Support for a good number of years, and they make video content about this space. There's lots of other people who are talk a lot about that are kind of YouTube gurus that talk about the health of YouTube channels. I think that those can be helpful, but again, wood for the trees of what you're really trying to achieve here. I think what I like about someone like Colin and Samir is they focus more on building something that is sustainable and thinking in TV formats, thinking in narrative, thinking in story, which again is closer to where I align than just, you can't always algorithm your way out of not making a great show for now, right? People are very quick to blame the algorithm, that the algorithm is really good at just chasing where the audience is. Sometimes, again, like go back to that all you can eat buffet. We're not always our best selves at an all you can eat buffet, right? And so I think it's also just exploring that sometimes YouTube is very good at delivering for mass big audiences as well as little kind of niches, but of finding what that group is, and accepting that maybe if something's not working, maybe it's the audience not loving it. And that's a hard process to sit in, but I think that the algorithm is very good at giving content to people who want it and where it serves something clear.
Nico, this is also great, but who is going to pay for all of this? Can you talk us through the money reality of digital first kids IP?
Yeah. I don't know, there's a multiple different, so do you want to talk about kids specifically, or do you want because it's an issue here that we're seeing across, funding is an issue at scale, right? In the industry right now, platforms aren't really wanting to pay. They're wanting proven IP. YouTube is the ground to potentially prove your IP, but it's also then an opportunity if you can hold all your rights, but funding is still an issue. So I think it's an issue in kids, and I think it's an issue beyond that. What I would say is I look at a lot of this as having to be a IP business, and you have to create a startup business plan around rather than chasing a commission. I think the other side of it is there are commissioners out there looking to fund digital first series. So the BBC in the UK are doing that. Channel 4 are doing that. Comedy Central are doing that. There are commissioners funding digital first. What those deals look like and the budget sizes you can expect are probably different to what maybe some producers are used to. But again, what they're asking for is be really clear on what your audience need that you're delivering is, and kind of that needs to be clear in your pitch. So this isn't just reversioning TV pitches for YouTube. This is building formats from the ground up based off what you think and your research shows there is an audience appetite for. I think the exploration sometimes needs to be on sweat equity, which is a really hard thing to do. But again, if you can provide a startup business model around an IP, there's also a world where that transmedia flywheel can pay for the content in the long term, where you then are proposing to investors, right? And your investors are then commissioners, and you have to be more entrepreneurial rather than just kind of looking at that. To me, the end goal then is success rather than a show commission as well. And I think that the game is so hard already to get a show commission, but in some ways the commission, to me, you have to have such big scale. YouTube channels, if they're an individual creator, I think you can kind of sustain it on, especially in niche audiences, I think you can sustain it on quite low numbers. But I think if you're building a business around it, and you're trying to deliver something to quite a broad audience, you're looking at kind of 10, 20 million monthly views to be able to sustain that beyond just ad revenue. We're also talking about audience scale for conversion to in-person events, other product lines, merchandise. I think you have to have that scale to convert. Otherwise, you just won't get that conversion because these platforms don't deliver the same level of conversion as others have in the past. And I think audiences aren't always as deliberately tuning in. They are kind of just clicking and watching sometimes. And so you have a much broader kind of core, casual and new set of potential audiences, which is huge and amazing if you can convert, but it's a lot more challenging if you can't. I think you need to be delivering that kind of scale of audience. That takes about 2 years to get there. So I'm not expecting that to be from day one, but that is the realistic scale to deliver a proper transmedia flywheel proposition that I think that will look really interesting to people.
I'm getting goosebumps and chills just hearing you describe the scale that's involved, Nico.
Yeah, but that's why the research is so important, right? Because you can mitigate a lot of that risk up front by doing really good research and analysis. And so I think because that's such a scary place to start, that's why it's one of the things that we offer. We do that for people on behalf of people because we know how to do it quickly and effectively. And I say it's still a kind of a 2-3 month process to do that really deep analysis, to have that as something to look at, to redevelop a show. But that allows you at least to mitigate some of the risk before you go to platform. And I think that there's huge opportunity in the iterate and learn, but I think that there's also needs to be the expectation of research upfront and analysis upfront and opportunity kind of reviews.
It's very cool. And I know you were talking about that creator who spent 2 years creating this animated pilot and then there's nothing to follow on with it. I think you also described that it is suicide on YouTube to spend 2 years in development and uploading it and hoping that it works.
Yeah, and I think that there are local stories that you guys have, like Glitch, that can also confuse things. Glitch has been on the platform for over 10 years. They've built a massive, really strong community, and they dropped an indie pilot, but again had multiple episodes to follow it on, and were dropping it on a channel of 10 million subscribers who had a kind of very strong fan base, contextualizing the moments and the stories that move through the industry. I think there are people who are dropping indie pilots and getting 1 million views, which is really, really impressive for a first signal, first drop on a channel. That's really, really impressive. But I think that there is huge appetite, but it needs that follow on, right? And even if you're going monthly, it needs some follow on. And I think building business models for people and figuring out a path that allows for regular views and audience build and fandom build, that's how we're going to navigate this time and this space.
What do you wish someone had told you before you went all in on this?
It's really hard still. I guess I think you see what rises to the top on YouTube, right? Like that's what it's really good at doing, is it provides content that's already popular and it's already doing well often. And the majority of people got over, X amount of subscribers and monthly fans, monthly views. And so I think it's still a long road, right? The virality narrative hurts this space a lot. And it doesn't mean there aren't these edge case moments, but that's not the majority. And the majority is a 2-3 year build. That mirrors what's the cultural timeline for something to really build at scale, right? And we've seen this in the kind of the bigger kind of drama series on streamers. It's that second or third season, and once it's been in the world for a couple of years, that's when it has time to rise to that place of consciousness for us all, and that's when it starts to be an IP. And I think that hasn't changed still. And it's taken me a while to accept that, because sometimes I just want those quicker wins because I know that the platform has the ability to do that, but it still just takes time. I think that's the big thing for people to be aware of, is it still takes time and it still takes a commitment of 18 to 24 months before you start to really turn the wheels at speed. But I would say it's go for it as well. Start researching and start developing for this space and understand what audiences want now on the platform, because particular formats work for particular reasons. And I think understanding that why for audiences, why for the platform, will help you a lot. And I think that, yeah, you can't just bring everything to the table here, but dive in and learn, be curious, be excited. I know you'll also be a bit frustrated, but sit in some of those feelings. Like that's part of this process. Like sometimes it's frustrating to see the formats and the shows that are really popular here. Like I still feel that every day.
Nico, we ask all of our guests this question before they leave. What is your big idea to reimagine the screen industry?
If you watched the drama series All Her Fault, did you watch that show? So that's a show which I said to people that felt like the way I describe writing for YouTube, that was a really great drama, long form drama series that had clarity, short act one. It was all in the curiosity gap was in the title. And I know it was based off a book of the same title, but it's that thing of like, man, it delivers. The first scene has you and sets up the whole, it's not just a hook. And I think the word hook can sometimes be really dirty, but it just sets up stakes, clarity and narrative clarity, and is like a Pandora's box of questions that you want answered. And I think that that's actually what hooks in narrative are more about, or long form are about, is actually how can you unleash a Pandora's box of questions? And then it's really exciting, right? Like then you're like, oh my God, I need to have all these things. And I think if you don't find what that is in your story, then you're going to have a harder job. The way those are shows that are, to me, work within current consumption limitations and audience consumption needs. That is what we say about YouTube, right? Like it's not a YouTube thing. It's a vertical, cross genre. Like,
wow, it's an audience thing.
It's an audience thing. YouTube is a vacuum because it serves an audience thing. It's an audience need. It serves an audience consumption point. And a consumption problem is people are time poor. They want to know what they're getting. They're selfish. They want to know that the thing that they're going to get is going to satisfy that need in that moment. And they don't have the time to be disappointed. And a really great example was my fiance used to watch a show on Channel 4's in the UK's catch-up service, but she started to watch the same show on YouTube because they started to do thumbnail first repackaging. So she had clarity of stakes, she had clarity of story, which she didn't get from their own service, but she did on their YouTube repackaging. So she knew that if she was going to sit and watch for a 45-minute episode, she knew by the title and the thumbnail, it was going to be worth the 45 minutes. She didn't know that on their platform.
Wow.
And so to me, it's an audience thing. YouTube is growing because of an audience problem or an audience need, an audience desire. And it does that. It does that really elegantly. And I think that to me is the thing to engage with. And so even if you're not planning to making a show for YouTube, engage with why YouTube is growing. And it's because of that. There is such fertile ground and demand from audiences for new stories that tell something clear and specific. And I think that a lot of us don't have the time and headspace to dedicate to long, meandering stories. So I think sometimes actually like tickling and signaling to that lizard brain in us and engaging with that clarity of story and narrative, there is still huge potential for new if you can do that. And I think, again, engaging with what is the audience challenge right now as a consumer, how many shows have you been recommended and have never got round to watching over the last 10 years? Thinking about that is important to helping your development process. IP is great. And I think that there is this world that we need it to generate revenue. But I think, again, it's also about stories that are really timely. And I think if we can see more stories that answer and provide solves for audience needs, then there's so much opportunity for great new stories to cut through.
Nico Lockhart, thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much.
We Interrupt This broadcast is recorded on the unceded lands of the
Gadigal people of the Eora Nation,
the Turrbal and Yagara people,
the Yugambeh language people, and the Kaurna people of the Adelaide Plains, and we acknowledge them as the traditional custodians and first storytellers of these regions.
Always was, always will be.